recording. This class is being recorded here on my computer, and I'll share it and upload it at a later date. So there was this old couple who lived in the shtetl. They lived in a little city near Zhytomyr in the Ukraine. It's not in the Ukraine. Where's Zhytomyr? Mordechai, he's telling me no. It's not in the Ukraine? Okay, wherever it was. But
it is in the Ukraine. It is in the Ukraine.
Oh, okay. So this couple, they're living a happy life. They have healthy children, thank God. They even married off some of their children. They have grandchildren. They have enough money to make a living and to live comfortably. And one night, the husband comes home from the synagogue and he's elated. He's in seventh heaven. He has a smile going from one ear to the other. He's all excited. And he comes into the home singing and dancing. And his wife says, "No, what's the excitement?" He says, "Do you know what I heard in the synagogue? The rabbi shared amazing news with us in the synagogue." She says, "What's the good news?" He says, "The rabbi said that any day the Mashiach is coming and he's going to take all of us out of Ukraine and bring us to Jerusalem, where we'll have the third temple. It's going to be amazing. The Mashiach is going to come." And she looks at him and says, "Who needs this headache of the Mashiach coming and taking us out of our happy place where we live here? Who wants to travel and schlep all the way to Israel? Also, it's a bad neighborhood to live in. Life is good here. Who needs the Mashiach?" He says, "But don't you know that when Mashiach will come, the rabbi said, all of material wealth will be in abundance. I won't have to work so hard to make a living." She says, "There you go again. You see, you're complaining about working so hard. Why are you complaining? Do you know that our neighbor works so much harder than you and earns so much less than you? We have a decent living. You have a job. Why do we need the headache of the Mashiach?" So he says, "But don't you remember the pogroms? Every few years, the local Cossacks, they stir up this anti-Semitic narrative and they rally all the troops. And there's these pogroms where the local peasants, they come and they ravage our cities. When Mashiach comes, we'll be able to go to Jerusalem. We won't have any more pogroms." So his wife says, "I have a better idea. Why doesn't Mashiach come and take all the Cossacks to Jerusalem?" And that is, the story here is, there's one thing to take a Jew out of exile. Another thing is to take exile out of the Jew. There's an exile mentality and there's a redemption mentality. Now, what we hope to accomplish with this course is twofold. Number one, to take the exile mentality that we may have out of us and to allow us to see things in a more redemption-like, a more Mashiach-like reality. And obviously, the ultimate goal is that through us studying these ideas about the coming of Mashiach, that we actually experience a merit to see this special redemptive era with the coming of Mashiach. But the goal and what we hope to accomplish is the ideas that we will study are all there to help us lead us on a path to be able to, borrow the words from the Rebbe, to open up our eyes, to see reality in a different way, to put on a new pair of glasses. Some of you I see have beautiful glasses. They're really nice. But there's another pair of glasses that has a different type of lens. It's called the Geula, the redemption type of lens. And that is what we hope to accomplish through this course. Now, I have to tell you that the extremely talented scholars and writers who created this course at the Jewish Learning Institute, they shared with us that this course is being geared for people that are somewhat familiar with the concept of the coming of Mashiach. They're not hearing about this idea for the first time. In fact, I must tell you that in the coming year, we always have the 3 main courses. The third course in the coming year, in the spring of 2021, is a 6-week course all about the coming of Mashiach. But that is going to be a different style for people that haven't heard about the coming of Mashiach, to introduce the idea to them, and I'm sure we're all going to gain from it. But this, I may say, is a more of an advanced style course. And I share this with you because I think it's important that you will notice that there'll be certain ideas that we will share, and you may say, 1 second, I'm lacking some of the more basic knowledge about this topic, and I don't fully get what you're saying. So I'm going to preface and say, I'm going to try to do my best to be able to accommodate all of us that are here. But if you see that I'm sharing something and you're not sure like the background, then try to just listen to the idea and try to just receive the idea that we're learning, and don't necessarily analyze it and try to internalize it, just receive it. And with time, the more we study, the more we'll see the bigger picture. So I'm not saying that I'm going to leave you hanging in every lesson. I'll say, oh, you'll get the whole picture next week. But I'm giving you a heads up and letting you know sometimes you may not get the full picture, and it's okay. But when you know that you're going into this, sometimes I'm getting a piece of something, then you know, okay, I'll hold on to the piece and I'll try to understand this piece without getting the bigger picture. I'll also preface and say, I'm sure we all have different ideas, different tidbits about the coming of Mashiach that we've heard, that we're studied over time. And I might share something and you say, hey, isn't it like this? And I'm going to tell you, there are going to be things you're going to hear that are going to sound contradicting to things you may have heard in the past. It's okay. This is just part 1. These 5 lessons is only the first part of this series. The Jewish Learning Institute has already put together 12 lessons on this topic with 3 different parts to the series. So you'll have the opportunity to get different clarifications based on ideas that you've heard in the past. And also, I must say, this topic of Mashiach is very vast, very complex. So sometimes we'll talk about a certain topic, and you might want to lead into another, and I'll hold you back from doing so because we might do that on a different week. Don't take it personal. Just for the benefit of everyone to be able to have a structured course, sometimes we'll have to stay in a certain topic and not be able to run from one to the other. So with these prefaces, we'll begin. Mashiach, or the Messiah, the final redemption. Words that we've heard so many times, right? There's one of the most famous Jewish songs that are known to non-Jews is Mashiach, Mashiach, Mashiach. Ay, 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 ay. I know there's a Jewish caterer in Montreal. He's been to many Italian weddings, and he's heard many times by these Italian weddings the song Mashiach, Mashiach. It's a good song. People like it, right? And you've heard prayers, finishing off a class, maybe merit to the coming of Mashiach. We've heard this idea many times, but we want to understand, what is it? What is it truly all about? And I want to share a few minutes of just a general picture of what this idea of Mashiach is before we get into tonight's specific topic. God created the world 6 days. And on the 6th day, God created Adam and Eve, the first human beings, and they were living in this perfect world. They were living in the Garden of Eden up until that moment when they committed the sin of eating from the tree of knowledge. The world was in a perfect state. But then they messed up and they ate from the tree of knowledge, and then they were banished from the Garden of Eden, and the whole world changed. Up until that point, God's presence was revealed in this world. You're able to see God and spirituality in the same way you could see all material and physical matter. But with that sin, it changed. The lights went out. The godly light, the spiritual light of the world went out, and we weren't able to see it anymore. And then at the time when God gave the Jewish people the Torah, Mount Sinai, once again that light went on. Again, there was that ability to really relate and appreciate and see God and godliness, but only for a short time until the Jews again messed up and they committed the sin of the golden calf. But then God forgave them and God said, we'll be able to get back there. And finally, with the building of the temple in the time of Solomon, that was a special time. The Jews were on the highest, greatest level they ever were in spiritually. The world was permeated with the feeling of God. All Jews were able to appreciate and sense and really feel a closeness to Hashem, a closeness to God. But then with time, as the spiritual situation deteriorated, ultimately with the destruction of the temple, a heavy, dark exile settled in. And the notion of God became more and more distant. The idea of spirituality became more and more distant. And the darkness of the world and the layers of darkness with time begin to cover more and more and get thicker and thicker. And here we are now, about 2,000 years since this exile began, and certain things seem very distant. What is the idea of the redemption? In Hebrew known as the Geula. Geula is when we will go back to that initial state of how the world was when it was first created, what Adam and Eve experienced before they ate from the sin, before they committed the sin and ate from the tree of knowledge. The world will go back to how it was in the beginning. Not that we're going to invent something new that never existed, but rather we're going to be able to get back to our roots, bring the world back to its perfect state as it was in the beginning of creation. That is what redemption looks like. The world being in its perfect, pristine state as it was before we came and messed it up. And then there's this thing called Mashiach. What is Mashiach? Mashiach refers to a person, a Jewish king, who is a descendant of King David, who will usher in this era called redemption, called Geula, and will bring about this era that we are hoping for and praying for. Now, what will this era look like? What are all of the transformations that will take place when Mashiach comes, after this era of redemption will be like? That is a lot of what we will be studying over the next few weeks. But tonight we're going to study about one specific detail in this process of the coming of the redemption by the King Mashiach. And that is, how will it happen? Will it be either a gradual, natural course of events that will take place to take us from a state of exile into a state of redemption? Or will it be a supernatural, miraculous, sudden transformation in this world that will radically and suddenly take us out of a state from redemption to, take us out of a state of exile into redemption? And I think this question is really important. You know why? Because so many people, and if I could confess, me included, as much as we pray and we hope Mashiach should come, we're also somewhat afraid, right? I don't want to be taken out of the shtetl next to Zhitomar. Let Mashiach come and take the Kazakhs. You know, do we want our entire world and everything as we know it to be suddenly shaken up and so different than how we know things? On the other hand, with what's going on in the world, especially with the challenges that we're going through today, maybe that is the magic pill. Just get it. Why do we need the whole slow process of finding a vaccine and then having a slow financial recovery? Maybe we could have this sudden and instantaneous salvation that will come with the coming of Mashiach. But do I have to put all of my rationale and intellect on the side to embrace this idea? So is it a quick process, a slow process? Is it a natural process? Is it a miraculous process? What is it? That is what we're going to be speaking about tonight. So, friends, I have good news for you. Tonight, all of the texts that we are going to be reading will be on the screen. But if you do want to also have your own book in your hand at home, I'm going to share with you a link where you could go on Amazon, and for $12, you could order your own book that will have all the texts relating to the classes that we are going to learn. But for tonight, we're going to have it on the screen. So now I'm going to share my screen with you. And let me just make sure that no one's trying to get in, that I can't. Okay, we're good. I usually don't like having my phone with me, but being that we changed things up a little bit, that we have a new Zoom, I just figured it won't be a bad idea that if someone's trying to connect, they can connect and let me know. So that's why I might look at my phone from time to time. God forbid not to respect this illustrious, honorable, and prestigious crowd that we have here. And I mean that seriously. So the answer to the question is, like all good Jewish answers, is it gradual or instantaneous and sudden? Is it supernatural, miraculous, or is it a natural? The answer is both are right. You'll find sources in Jewish texts that support both ideas, right? Remember, I told you the famous story that I've shared many, many times about the rabbi who had a couple meet him for marriage therapy, marriage counseling. And the rabbi asks the wife, tell me the story. And the wife shares with her the entire story about how horrible her husband is. And he says, you know what, you're right. And then he turns to the husband and says, tell me your side of the story. And the husband goes and shares how horrible his wife is. He says, you know what, you're right. And his wife, who's in the other room, overhears the rabbi and says, you're speaking nonsense. How could they both be right if they're saying the opposite things? And he turns to her and says, you're also right. So whichever side you think it is, the answer is you're right. Because let's see here. We'll see together here. I'm going to read two texts that support one side and two texts that support another side. This is a text here from the book of Malachi, one of the prophets. Malachi says, behold, I send my angel, and he will clear a way before me. And suddenly, God whom you seek will come to his temple. And behold, the angel of the covenant whom you desire is coming, says God of hosts. What's the key word here? Malachi says, this thing will happen suddenly, out of the blue, out of nowhere. You won't be expecting it when Mashiach comes. So here you see a text that tells us that you're going to be in the middle of sitting and mowing your lawn in just a regular day, and out of nowhere, Mashiach comes and suddenly the world is a different place. Now, is it going to be miraculous or super or natural? Well, let's see here. We're going to read here a letter that Maimonides shared to the people, the community in Yemen, where he shares with them about the coming of the Mashiach. Let's see this together. He writes, the Messiah will be unknown before his coming, but he will prove by means of miracles and wonders that he is the true Messiah. The mere report of his advent will strike terror into the hearts of all the kings of the earth, and their kingdoms will fall as they will be unable to make war or revolt against him. They will neither defame, deny, nor question him. For the miracles that he will perform will frighten them into complete silence. Isaiah refers to the submission of the kings to the Messiah in the verse, kings shall shut their mouths, for he will be unlike anything they ever saw or heard. He will slay whom he will, none will escape or be saved, as it is written, and he shall smite the land with the rod of his mouth. So here you see a text where Maimonides comes, without getting into all the details of what he says, but what you do see, he shares that the way Mashiach will come, it will be filled with much drama, with miracles. There will be a king who will instill fear into the hearts of all the kings of the nations, and all will surrender themselves and submit themselves to the authority of this Jewish king known as the Mashiach, the Anointed One. And it will be accompanied with miracles and with wonders. So here you have two texts, one from the biblical text, from the Torah itself in the book of Malachi, that will happen suddenly. And here we have from Maimonides, one of the greatest Jewish philosophers, scholars, teachers of Torah, legal authorities who tells us here that it will happen in a miraculous and a wondrous, supernatural process. You're sitting here by the computer, trying not to fall asleep, and suddenly you're going to hear the sound of that booming shofar, and we're going to start dancing, be raised on clouds, taken to Jerusalem. The world will change instantaneously, suddenly, in a radical, miraculous, wondrous way. Well, that's the first notion, the first school of thought when it comes to the coming of Mashiach. But here I'm going to read to you another two texts that support a very different narrative. Let's see this. This is from the Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, in the first volume of the Talmud, the first page. It says as follows. There were three great sages, Rabbi Chia Bar Abba and Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, two great sages, were walking in the valley of Arbel, and they witnessed the advent of dawn. Rabbi Chia told Rabbi Shimon, so will be the redemption of the Jewish people. At first, it will be a trickle. And as it continues, it will gain steam and expand. As it is stated, though I will sit in darkness, God is a light to me. Meaning, the way this process of the redemption will unfold will be similar to how the sun rises, how the light in the morning begins to shine. It doesn't begin to shine in its full glory at the first moment of dawn, but slowly, gradually, the world becomes a little more lighter and brighter, and the light becomes more bright and luminous. And Rabbi Shimon tells Rabbi Chia, this is how the world will be transformed, a slow, gradual transformation. The way the light slowly and gradually illuminates the world. So it's not sudden. Here we see a text in the Talmud that it's gradual. It's a slow process. And what about the idea of the miracles? So before we read together a letter that Maimonides wrote to the community of Yemen about how Mashiach is going to come with much fanfare and miracles and wonders. But now we'll read a passage from Maimonides' own writing in his halachic work where he speaks about the coming of Mashiach, and he shares just the opposite. Let's see this. What does Maimonides say about the coming of Mashiach? He says as follows, one should not presume that the Messianic king must work miracles and wonders, bring about new phenomena in the world, resurrect the dead, or perform other similar deeds. This is not the case. Let's continue. Do not presume that in the Messianic age, any facet of the world's nature will change, or there will be innovations in the work of creation. Rather, the world will continue according to its pattern. There won't be any major differences in miracles. Our sages taught there will be no difference between the current age and the Messianic era, except our emancipation from subjugation to the Gentile kingdoms. Other than the fact that we'll be free, independent people, not subjugated to other Gentile nations, there won't be any differences in the nature of the world. So what's going on here? We have two narratives, two schools of thought. On one hand, we have Malachi who tells us it will happen suddenly, and the letter that Maimonides shares to the community of Yemen that will happen with much miracles and wonders. And here we have the Talmud that tells us that it will be the way the process of dawn, a slow, gradual light. And Maimonides in the book of the Mishnah Torah that tells us, if you're expecting all these miracles, that's not what needs to happen for the redemption to come, for the Messianic era. It's just nothing's changing in the order of the world and the natural order. I just want to make a side point. You saw Maimonides says that it doesn't have to be the resurrection of the dead. This is out of context. In no way is Maimonides saying that we don't believe that there's going to be the resurrection of the dead when Mashiach comes. Maimonides tells us that it's actually one of the 13 principles of our faith to believe that that is going to happen. Here he's speaking about the process to get there. It doesn't have to happen with miracles and wonders. That could happen once we're there already. But that's just a side point in case that threw you off. And if my clarification threw you off, I'm also sorry for that. So here we have two perspectives. Which one is right? What is it? And here you have Maimonides himself. To the people of Yemen, he says one thing, and in his book of Mission Torah, he says something else. Is it going to be a supernatural, miraculous, sudden change, or will it be a natural, gradual change? Which one is it? And we see Jewish texts supporting both ways of thinking. So, friends, the answer is a very wise Jewish answer. The answer is, it depends. It depends. It could happen this way. It could happen that way. What am I talking about? What does it depend on? So I want to share with you another fascinating text passage from the Talmud. This is a fascinating passage in the Talmud that will introduce to us a whole nother phenomena that I have a feeling most of us are completely not familiar with this whole notion when talking about the coming of Mashiach. Look at your screen here. Let's read this together. This is from the Talmud. Rabbi Alexandri says, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi raised a contradiction. The verse, I, God, in its time, I will hasten it, reads, in its time, indicating that there is a designated time for the redemption. And it reads, I will hasten it, indicating that there is no set time for the redemption. So which one is it? There's a verse that says, in its time, I will hasten it. So what is it? Will the Mashiach come? Will the redemption happen in its time? Meaning there's a set time for it to happen? Or is it, I will hasten it? I'll bring it at any time. There is no set time. Which one is it? Can it happen at any moment in history? Or is there a set time for when it has to happen? The verse seems to be saying both. But how could it be both? So Rabbi Alexandria explains, if they merit, then I will hasten the coming of the Messiah. If they do not merit, Messiah will come in its designated time. So here the Talmud introduces a very interesting idea when it comes to the final redemption. There are two tracks. There are two plans. There's plan A and plan B. I'm not sure which one is A and which one is B, but there are two plans. One plan is, there's a designated time, there's a set time by when Mashiach is going to come. Another plan is, Mashiach can come at any given time. It depends on the Jewish people. It depends on our merits. It depends on our behavior. If we're well behaved, Mashiach could come sooner, before its designated time. But if we don't merit to bring Mashiach before its designated time, the Mashiach will come in its designated time. And I will elaborate and explain what does that mean. How does that work? How can we make Mashiach come sooner than its designated time? What do we have to do to make Mashiach come sooner than its designated time? And what's the difference if it comes in its designated time or if it comes in its earlier time? We'll cover that. We'll explain that. But give me a thumbs up if you followed with that point. There's two ways in how Mashiach can come. One is it comes at its predestined designated time. The other is if we merit, then we can hasten the arrival and it could come earlier. Give me a thumbs up if you followed that point. Maybe you don't understand it, but you hear that idea. Give me a thumbs up if you got it. I'm seeing thumbs ups. Very good. Very good. Sander, you give me a thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay, good. Very good. Excellent. Now, before we fully grasp this idea, I want to bring in another point, and that is the differences in perspectives on what we discussed earlier on whether Mashiach comes in a sudden, instantaneous, supernatural, miraculous way, or whether Mashiach could come in a gradual, natural way, that depends on when Mashiach comes. It depends on whether we merit and it's in its hastened time, or whether Mashiach comes in its pre-designated set time. If Mashiach comes through our merit in an earlier time, then it will happen with great fanfare, with great miracles, and it could happen instantaneously, suddenly, without a slow process. But if we don't merit, the Mashiach doesn't come through our good effort, but rather Mashiach comes because the predestined, predesignated time arrives, and Mashiach comes, so then it happens in a natural, slow, gradual process. And therefore, it's not a contradiction in Jewish philosophy or in different texts on whether what happened in a different process. Each one is talking about a different element within the coming of Mashiach. One is talking about the way Mashiach could come if it is in a hastened, meritorious way, and then it happens in a miraculous, sudden way. And the other people were talking about Mashiach coming in its predestined, pre-allotted time, and then it happens in a natural, gradual way. So it doesn't have to be that there's a contradiction, but rather two schools that are talking about two ways of how Mashiach could come. And this idea that I shared with you, I'm actually going to read it in the text from a great a Kabbalist, as well as a great commentator on the Torah, the Rabbi Chaim Ibn Attar, known as the Or HaChaim, where he shares this idea. Let's read this text together. Text 6 on our board. Let's read it. If the redemption will arrive through the merits of the Jewish people, it will be wondrous. The Redeemer will appear miraculously from the heavens. That's if it comes through our merits in an earlier time. By contrast, if the Jews are unworthy and the redemption comes only because the clock ran out, it will be different. Regarding which the Talmud states, the Redeemer will arrive as a pauper riding on a donkey. The prophecy that the redemption will be hastened will occur if the Jewish people will be worthy. Regarding a redemption in the set time, the verses state that a ruler will arise in Israel, naturally, as do all rulers in this world. So here the Or HaChaim tells us that the different schools of thought, whether it's sudden or gradual, miraculous or natural, depend on us. If we bring about Mashiach through our merits in an earlier time, so then it happens miraculously, and Mashiach coming from the heaven, and it's all amazing, 1, 2, 3, hapatapatu, it's going to be exciting. But if it happens when the time runs out and that deadline arrives, so then it's going to be in a slower process, in a natural process. So that answers our question. Which one is it? It depends. It depends on us. So that's so to say, that's only the dry details. But we gotta delve deeper. No? What do you say? We gotta get behind the scenes over here. Understand what's going on here. What does it mean to bring the redemption in its earlier time, and what does it mean that it's happening in its set allotted time? What's going on here? Which will also affect the outcome of what the process will be like, whether it's amazing, with miraculous and wild, or more natural and gradual. Okay. I think we're ready to now, before we get into what I'll call the Kabbalah of this and the soul of this idea, I say we take a quick wake up or refresher. Yeah? So if you're wearing pants, you keep your camera on. If not, close your camera before you stand up. I'm joking. And even if you close your camera, I'm sure you're doing what you need to do. Go get some water, wash your face. Let's go do some jumping jacks. Who wants to join me for some jumping jacks? Let's go. Challenge you to 20 jumping jacks. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I say 20, I change my mind. 10. Okay. Take a minute. If you want, you can fill a l'chaim. Let's see if we can fill a l'chaim. Why not? I think I have the same little bottle here that I have from when we started doing Zooms before Purim. Same little bottle that I've been saying l'chaim out of. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. L'chaim, l'chaim,
L'chaim.
l'chaim to Mashiach, to the coming of Mashiach.
I'm with you.
How are we doing? We're good? Okay. Okay. Say the gym, you got freshened up, you're good? You missed it. We said a l'chaim before. L'chaim, l'chaim. Oh. Okay. Give everybody another 30 seconds. Mashallah, I didn't see any jumping jacks in your camera. Okay.
Cleaned my dishes.
Oh, you cleaned your dishes. Your wife will be very happy.
My jumping jack days are over.
Your jumping jacks days are still to come.
When Mashiach comes, I'll be able to do jumping jacks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Is everybody back? If you're not here, say me. Oh, okay. Nobody's not here. No one that was not here said me. Can I give a separate shout out for Minneapolis? Minneapolis is pretty impressive, I must say. I've been living here now for 6 years. This is our 6th summer here, but it's our first time I'm staying home all summer and going on vacation in Minneapolis. And I must say, I'm very impressed with the lakes and the parks. There really is so much beauty here in our state of Minneapolis. So just so good to be Hakara Satov, being thankful to God and to the government of Minnesota for creating so many beautiful public parks and lakes, and it's really an amazing place. Really, really nice. Okay, I think we're all here. We're back. We're ready to continue. Okay. So now, what's going on here? What is this idea of Mashiach coming early through our merits, or Mashiach coming at its predestined time? So, any of you remember, the old Mario games on the Game Boys, right? They used to be fat and big, and then became skinnier and skinnier, and then they became things that open up, and now they're extinct, and everybody has all these different PlayStations or games and apps, etc. I remember as a little kid, we had these games where Mario had to uncover all these coins, right? You got to go through these pipes underneath the ground, and you get all these different coins by jumping into them. And the more gold and the more coins you're able to collect in a certain amount of time, the more points you get, right? And you have all those little monsters out there that are trying to catch you and trying to eat you and catch you and stop you, and you gotta circumvent the challenges to be able to get more of that gold and uncover more of those treasures that are hiding in all these cool different places, right? And if you're good at it, then before the time runs out of the game, you're able to chop all of those coins, and you did a good job, and you move on to the next level, right? And then to the next level. And sometimes you don't get all of those coins, but as long as you don't get out, time of the game runs out, right? And you get what you get, or you get what you got, and you move on to the next level with less points. In a similar way, that is, in a way, the story of the world. God created the world. Yes, in the beginning, it was a perfect world, how Adam and Eve lived before the sin of the tree, eating from the tree of knowledge. It was a perfect world. But I have inside information for you. God actually planned that Adam and Eve would mess up and everything will be turned upside down. God never intended that the world would stay perfect forever. The plan was start off perfect so that we have a precedent and we know it was like this one day, years ago. It was once like this, so it's possible to get back to there. But the plan was always that when the sin of the eating of the tree of knowledge was committed, suddenly all of those special godly energies that were felt and apparent and just revealed all over the world, they all, so to say, became into little sparks of godly energy and became hidden and concealed all over the world in all different types of things. And God said, you know what? The game is starting. And what's the game? For Jewish people to interact with as many material items as possible in a good, positive, kind, godly way, in a way that's mandated by Torah. And by using these material items that have within them these godly sparks, godly energy in them, they will unleash that godly energy and elevate that material item. And the game is, when you're able, God says to the people, to unleash every single spark that there is hidden in this world, and you're able to refine and elevate all of the materialism that houses these godly energy sparks, then you win, and all of that accumulative godly energy bursts and again is apparent and reemerges in the world as it was in the beginning. In the world feeling and really connecting with God's presence. And we are those Marios running around the world, in all different parts of the world, and literally in all different parts of the world, interacting with all different types of things. For example, right now we're involving ourselves using the technology of the internet, of a computer. Perhaps there's a godly energy, a godly spark in this computer, in this technology, and we're utilizing it for something holy, studying Torah, then we are freeing and unleashing this godly spark that is in here. Or sometimes it could be an apple, and you make a blessing before you eat the apple, Bora Priya Eitz, and you eat the apple not because it tastes sweet and you like good food, but rather because you want to have strength, to be able to be healthy and serve God. So you're utilized in the apple for why it was created, to give you strength, and you're not being distracted by the materialism of it, but rather its core, what? The energy that is within it. By doing that, you unleash the godly spark and energy that is within it, and you elevate the materialism of that apple. And anything you come in contact with, let's say you're working to make a living, and your intent in making a living is not because you're greedy and you just want to accumulate wealth, but rather because you want to be able to live a good Jewish life. You want to be able to give charity. You want to be able to build a home, a beautiful home, because you want it to be a place that is a model for how life should be. So you want to have a comfortable, beautiful home and invite guests into your home and make beautiful Shabbat dinners and celebrate the Jewish holidays and provide for your family and send your kids to give them a good Jewish education. So all of the effort and everything you come in contact with during the time that you work, you're elevating all of that. And any special godly spark or energy that is contained within any of these items that you come up, that you chance upon your way in your career, you're unleashing all of these energies. And from beginning of time, from day one, from Adam and Eve until today, that's what we've been doing all over the world, unleashing these energies. And I have an interesting piece of information. The Kabbalah tells us that most of these godly sparks have already been unleashed during the time when the Jewish people were exiled in Egypt. there only remained, from when the Jewish people left Egypt, 288 godly sparks hidden throughout the world that are waiting to be unleashed. And once all 288 sparks are unleashed, then that era called redemption that is ushered in by the Mashiach happens. So anytime we do something positive, you never know. We may be unleashing that 288th spark in that interaction that we're having in a good way with something in this world, then boom, we have completed the mission of this game called life and creation, and then that era of Mashiach comes. But what happens if we're not successful in unleashing each one of these sparks? Well, then there's also, like many games have, there's also a time limit. You only got 5 minutes for this phase, this level of the game. Once the time runs out, okay, if you didn't get all of the sparks, you didn't get all of the coins, okay, you don't get that many points, but you're moving on to the next level. So God also, in the beginning of creation, now, one second, I missed this important point. Just like in Mario, there's those little monsters that try to eat him, and there's those spikes that come out of some of those pipes, then you have to make sure not to get bitten or poked. In life, God also created a lot of those little challenges. All evil in the world has one goal: to prevent us from peering deep beneath the outer surface. Prevent us from not utilizing the materialism in the world for a godly purpose, but rather to be sunk into the materialism and us being captured by it and forgetting about the godly intent and godly purpose, or God forbid, let alone to get involved in things that are forbidden. And the reason why they're forbidden is because there's no godly sparks there, so we have no business going there. So it's challenging. There's a lot of darkness out there, and there's a lot of little monsters and a lot of balls of fire coming our way, and a lot of the porcupines and spikes that are trying to catch us from getting into those coins. But you know what? You know what happens when that level is over and the 5 minutes run out? Just like you have no more opportunity to collect any more coins, all of those little monsters also disappear. When God said, yeah, I'm going to create the world, God says, I'm going to put evil and challenges in the way to make it worthwhile and give value to your work, so that you're not just robots or angels, but you have human value that is free choice that comes along with the effort and the process. Side point, just a little tangent. But there's also a limit. There's a certain time that I'm deciding, when this time comes, just all evil will be eradicated. And even if you don't succeed in unleashing every godly spark, the world will go back to being in its pristine, beautiful way as it was meant to be, with God's presence being revealed. So you understand what's going on here? In the beginning of time, God had a predestined time. And to be honest, we don't know when that time is. Perhaps there are numerous times when that could be. I don't know. I don't know when that time is. And if Mashiach does come, God forbid, not when we're able to bring it about through unleashing all of the sparks, but rather when God's predestined time arrives, so then it's not kaboom in a miraculous 1 to 3 way. It's a slow process over many years, a gradual, natural process that gets us there. But if we continue being at it and utilizing every opportunity that we have to try to unleash another spark and another spark, then at any moment we could bring about the coming of Mashiach, even if it's pre that time. And then if Mashiach does come, then it happens in a much more quicker way, in a miraculous way, and in a seamless way.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question?
Sure, you could ask me a question.
Why 288?
I don't know. You have to ask the Zohar. The Zohar. Why? That's the reality. There was a certain amount of sparks that there were. There's a certain amount of sparks that they already unleashed in Egypt, and there were 288 left. Why that number? I guess that's just as how many there are. What's the significance of that number, etc. That I don't know.
So we were like together between us. We were looking what the numerical value would be. In Gematria, we come to Rapach. I'm looking in my Moskilon, there is no Shurish Rapach. So we're already getting stuck. That's why I was wondering if you would know.
Yes, Rapach is the Rapach Nitzutzot, a Kabbalistic idea, but I'm going to not go into the details of why, okay?
Yes. Okay, thank you.
No problem. So now, friends, I want to read with you this idea that I just shared now from the Rebbe, text 8. The Rebbe shared this with us. This is from a talk of the Rebbe in the year 1970. Let's see this. There is indeed a paradigm about which the verse states, God set a date for evil. Creation itself dictates that evil only has a certain time span, after which it will expire and disappear without a trace. As the verse states, and I will remove the spirit of evil, it's a spelling mistake, from the world. However, this paradigm is only reserved for a situation in which the Jewish people haven't managed to make such a reality happen with their own transformative work. Then, indeed, the end of days happens on its own. However, if the Jews are so worthy and transform the world, the redemption will arrive prior to its allotted time. For though the clock will not yet have run out on evil, the Jews will have managed to banish it with their transformative work. This then is the true quality of Achishana. Achishana is the Hebrew word for I will hasten it. Over be'ita, which means in its destined time. It transforms even the darkest of evil. So here the Rebbe shares with us something profound. So we understand the basic advantage to Mashiach coming through our own meritorious efforts and unleashing all 288 godly sparks through interacting with all of the mundane material world in a godly way. So number one, the first advantage is, so then Mashiach comes in a much quicker way, in a sudden way, an instantaneous, miraculous way, versus a long, slow process. But there's another value, and that is to the quality of this Mashiach. Let me ask you, what's a better way to finish the first level of the Mario game because the time ran out and the game decided to bring an end to all the monsters? Or if you were able to find every one of those coins and thereby overpowering over all of the challenges and bringing the game to an end? Which one is more transformative, more powerful, more valuable? Obviously the latter. So too in our world, one way is that God brings an end to darkness because God decided there's an expiration date on darkness and on evil. But if it is that through our work we're able to bring an end to the darkness by transforming it, then that's much more profound. And that is the true advantage to Mashiach coming through our merit, is not only because it happens sooner and quicker and more miraculous, but the value we have accomplished it versus God's expiration date arrived and the darkness and the evil came to an end. But I have friends, I tell you, there's even more to this, but I want to quickly recap what we learned so far. We learned two perspectives. We learned Maimonides, Malachi, who tells us it happens suddenly, and he tells us, the community in Yemen, that it's going to happen with wonders and miracles. And then we learned the Talmud that says it's like the crack of dawn, slowly, a slow, gradual process. And Maimonides that tells us there's no miracle transformation happening. So we said, which one is it? So we were introduced that there's two ways of how Mashiach could come. One is through our merits. God says, I will hasten it. And the other way is in its allotted, predestined time. If it happens through our merits, so then it's in a miraculous, sudden way. If it happens when God decided that it would have had to happen from beginning of time, putting an expiration date, so then it happens in a slow, natural process. And we explained the idea behind it. That what will bring the coming of the Mashiach is either because the expiration date on evil came, so evil expired, and then it happens that way, or that we unleash all 288 sparks that are hidden throughout the world. And when we do that, we're able to make it happen sooner and in a much greater way. And the value of our work is much more valuable because we are transforming the darkness, rather it expires and it leaves on its own. But I'll tell you that there's also other advantages to it. And that is that in general, there's certain processes that we find in Torah about what has to happen for Mashiach to come. Elijah the prophet is going to come and tell us about Mashiach's coming, or certain preambles before Mashiach's coming. So to say, the prescribed process of what has to happen in order for the redemption to happen, many of these rules only have to happen if it's happening in its predestined time when God had a mind for it to happen from the beginning of time, because evil expires. But if Mashiach comes through our merits and unleashing all of the sparks, so then a lot of the system and the structure vanishes, and many of the steps in the redemptive process don't have to happen that way. We don't even maybe need Elijah the prophet to show up first. Mashiach could just show up and we go right away into that messianic redemptive era. So we really have a lot going for us to want to have Mashiach come in this earlier phase, in this earlier way through our merits, because there's a lot of merits to it. Sounds good? Are we doing good? Are we well? Are we good? Okay. So we have one more part to our lesson, and that is to bring this into something practical, practically speaking. And that is what I shared in the beginning. What's the goal of our lesson? For us to be able to start seeing the idea of the coming of Mashiach as a normal reality, as something that we could relate to, not something that I have to suspend my intellect and say I have blind faith in this thing, but it doesn't make sense to me, but rather something that I could embrace even intellectually. So I'll tell you, the idea of Mashiach coming in this radical, sudden way does demand a certain amount of faith. You have to believe and really believe that suddenly all the natural order will be suspended and we'll live in this miraculous era. It's not always easy to embrace such a thing. However, the other notion that it could happen in a slow, gradual time, and that God, when he created the world, set a certain expiration date for all evil and darkness, and when that expiration comes to an end, so then there's a king that arises and begins to slowly make things different and start the redemption process, and the world slowly changes, that a person could embrace. It's easier to embrace with intellect. And in fact, that is the balance in how we approach the faith in the coming of Mashiach. Because on one hand, we are told and we're taught in Judaism that it's a fundamental, it's a cornerstone of Jewish faith to believe at any moment Mashiach could come. But how could I, as a rational thinking person, really believe that? So here, I'm going to share with you something amazing. You know what? This process I'll get to that question in a moment that was chatted. This process of Mashiach coming in a gradual way, the good news is it started already. As in, not the process, not the redemption started, because we're still in exile, but the process of the gradual process of leading up to that era of redemption, it started already long ago. We're already deep into that process. So it's not that we have to wake up today and start this long process. We're already in it. This is something that the Rebbe insisted on, especially in the later years of his leadership, and he shared it and he highlighted the events going on in the world, and I'll share with you soon, of how this process actually started already a long time ago. So in a way, there's an interesting phenomenon here, and that is, you look back at history, then you look back at history and say, you know what, everything that happened already in history, in fact, is leading us to the arrival of the redemption in its predestined time. We're already long on the way. But you know what? We're not locked in that process. Just because I believe that we're in the slow, gradual process already for hundreds of years and getting to that time of the Messianic era. It doesn't mean that it has to happen that way. Any day we could do all that we need to do, and then we merit to having this sudden, instantaneous, miraculous coming of Mashiach through our efforts. So there's this this balance. When I look back at history, I'll look at things that are happening around me and behind me and say, these are the slow, gradual pieces and steps in the journey to get to the rational way that I could embrace the coming of Mashiach. But I could still know that at any moment, I could also have that faith, and at any moment, we might just tip that scale, unleash that final spark that's needed, and the Mashiach could come at any moment. And there will be that amazing salvation from all of the problems that we're going through in that really amazing instant way that we all so desperately pray for. And that's why from beginning of time, Jews always prayed for that. They never negated one over the other. They embraced both. What's happening is leading us to that predestined time. We're already long on the way. So, don't give up. It's happening soon because we've been working on this process already for a long time. And I'll share with you soon ideas that will help you see how the world is getting there. But at the same time, we're going to go full force and do another mitzvah and another good deed to make it happen in that hastened way that will be far more awesome. So what are things that the Rebbe would point out, and in general, things that are happening in the world, that have been happening in the world, that are signs that we began that slow, gradual process? And I'll share with you certain things that are happening within the Jewish world itself, and things that are happening in the world in general. Two examples but there are many more, but we don't have many more minutes. So 2 examples that within Judaism are signs that we're coming to that redemptive era. Number 1, Maimonides, when he describes what the world will be like in that redemptive messianic era, he uses one description, and he says, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God. We will be able to understand God the way we could understand arithmetic and mathematics and biology and Jewish law. We'll be able to start understanding godly concepts. That is what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. And friends, you know what? For most of our history, most of Jewish history, studying the mystical dimensions of Torah, the Kabbalistic ideas of Torah that speak about God, were not for the public, were not for the masses. A select few special, very pious, very spiritual people would study these things. Only in the last few hundred years did it become something that people started to study. It started with the Arizal. About 400 years ago, he said it's actually a mitzvah to start revealing this Torah. And then finally with the revelation of Hasidism, starting with the Baal Shem Tov and his successors, the Hasidic successors, and the leaders of the Rebbes of Chabad with the publishing and the revelation of the Tanya, and the hundreds and hundreds of Hasidic works. What is Hasidism? Is studying and learning about God, learning about the soul, the code of this world. We're already starting to get a taste, and it's more and more and more. A few hundred years ago, it was only for people that were great scholars who knew Hebrew. Today, any person who has access to a book or to the internet can study an endless amount of the deepest secrets of the Torah and have it understand it in a rational, intellectual way that you could digest it and internalize it and really appreciate it. Intellectually and even emotionally, you could really connect with these ideas. We are now, it's been hundreds of years, and we're getting closer and closer. The spread of the study of the mystical teachings of Torah, the secrets of the Torah that are a taste of what will be when Mashiach comes, are becoming more and more and more and more and more available. They're saturating the world. And even elements within traditional Judaism who are more reluctant to studying the Hasidic philosophy have also embraced it now and are studying it. So that's one example in the Jewish world, how we've been gradually getting closer to that era of understanding God. Another thing, and I think this is something that you all appreciate, because I think the fact that you're all here is because there's something about the Hasidic way of life that you all appreciate. And one of the elements that I think you all appreciate is the idea of the centrality of joy. Yeah? Who really doesn't like the fact that many times Hasidic and Chabad rabbis are happy. It really bugs you, huh? You really think that Judaism is meant to be a depressing thing, right? That's why you guys really hate coming. You don't show up. You always tell me how much it bothers you when it looks like I'm happy, right? People like joy, but even in the Talmud speaks about how once the temple was destroyed, Jews aren't allowed to be joyous. You're not allowed to sing, you're not allowed to dance, you're not allowed to experience joy. For hundreds of years, joy was something, when you thought of an observant way of life, it means you were a melancholy, somber person. People, it's very rare that you see pictures of ancient Jews with big smiles on their face. They always have this, serious look in their creases, in their forehead, and they're always arguing. But today, not because of modernizing Judaism, but specifically from Judaism itself, the Baal Shem Tov highlighted the importance of serving God with joy, and now it became a given. Obviously, you see a person who embraces a way of Torah, a way of Judaism, you hope they're happy. If they're not happy, there must be something wrong with their Judaism, right? You know why? Because we're getting closer to the redemption, when then, as we say in the paragraph before we say the grace after meals, then our mouths will be filled with song, and our tongues will be filled with laughter. We'll be filled with joy. Now, within the Jewish world for a few hundred years now, and it's more and more an emphasis on serving God and being happy, upbeat, joyous people. It's slow, but we're already deep into this process. And then if you look around the world, yes, sometimes you can look at the world and you paint it with a very dark brush and you say things are completely upside down, especially now with the pandemics and election season. Things still seem crazy with what, but take a step back and look at history as we know it. Most of history, the world was, number one, the levels of poverty. Lifespan expects whatever the word is, how long people would live. War, people were busy killing people left and right. All you had was wars going on. And I'm not saying that today there's no wars that shouldn't be happening, there's no evil. But the amount of democracies that there are in the world, with civil rights and with human rights, and people have freedoms that were never experienced in all of history. You think about the fact of the establishment of the United Nations, and as flawed as it is, but the very fact that there is an establishment, an organization that represents the entire world with the purpose of creating peace and avoiding war, that's a huge thing in the context of history. And with nations trying to bring about remember President Bush can never say that word, the proliferation of nuclear proliferation. He always just make a joke, he couldn't say it, right? Where nations are trying to encourage people not to use nuclear power for war, but to use it, harness that energy for positive things, for positive energy, not for war machines, but to be able to energize a society, right? Think about those prophecies that when Mashiach comes, we're going to beat our swords into plowshares. The perspective of the world in a major way is, yes, on one hand, we do want to be able to protect ourselves from our enemies, but ideally, people rather, we didn't have to invest so much in machines for war, and we rather harness our energy and all of our capabilities for positive things. And if there could be a de-escalation in all nations warfare, everybody would be happier. The world appreciates the values of peace, the values of human dignity more than ever before, in a real concrete way. Things that hundreds of years ago people never believed would be possible. And even, yes, there is injustices that go on, but that's the exception to the rule. That's not the way people feel things should be. Why? Because the world is long in its process of coming closer to that era when the world will be filled with peace, will be filled with harmony. We're getting there. We really are getting there. Also, religious liberty. When have Jews ever been as free as we are today? There's no one that's stopping us from being able to practice our Judaism with pride in the open. Jews never dreamt of having the liberties that we have today in so many places in the world. These are all a taste and even more than a taste. They're so much more of what will happen when Mashiach comes. Or think about the gathering of the exiles. Millions of Jews already living in Israel. Not that that is the beginning, not that that means that the redemption has begun, but the process to bring us to the redemption is definitely very actively in place. So much going on. So much going on. Here we're going to see something the Rebbe shared in 1992. Where do we have it here? Let me see. Text 10. Let me see this here. Let's read this. The Rebbe speaks over here. Let's see this. This is 1992, 1991, the Rebbe speaks. In these times, heads of state the world over have decided to reduce their weapons capacity and invest in economic, peaceful measures. This is, after all, what the prophet promises, that they will beat their swords into plowshares, dismantling weapons and fashioning them into tools to work the ground, to produce bread. The Rebbe continues, we have a clear sign that the signs of the ultimate redemption are beginning to blossom. Many great and mighty countries have reformed and established noble governments. Think about the fall of the Iron Curtain, the communism. Grounded in just and fair laws. This too is a foretaste of the overall reform and peace that Mashiach will bring to the world. Another realization of this promise in the world's attitude to the Jewish people, as we have been granted religious freedom. Right? So from all different aspects, you just have to open up your eyes, and let alone in the advances of science. You speak about people who will live forever when Mashiach comes. There are people that are respected scientists that speak about being able to turn around aging. That people shouldn't age, not crazy kooks that the people introduce a crazy idea. We call them kooks, and then as they become embraced, it becomes more mainstream, and the crazies become normal because more people agree with it. But these are ideas, and also the advancements in medicine and science. It's amazing, and let alone what is happening now with all the darkness of the pandemic. But I tell you, there's such a reawakening, and not that I'm saying so it's a good thing that we're suffering, but still looking at there's a reawakening, there's a spiritual reawakening going on in the world. And even whether you agree with the politics and the platforms of the specific institutions that are behind the demonstrations, but the very fact that millions of people around the world are chanting and demonstrating for what? For peace, for justice, for equality. People who until now all they were busy with was their own themselves. And here they're getting out of their comfort zone to advocate for others. What could be more positive than that? The very idea of people thinking about other people, even if they're different in creed and race and color and religion, but realizing that we're all equal and created in the image of God. These are beautiful things. So friends, the good news is, if we're in need Mashiach to come because the predestined, a lot of time needs to arrive and there's a slow, gradual process. Well, look around us and look what's been going on. We've been long into this gradual process. We might be at the end of it at any moment. But you know what? We could still also jump ship from that process and just do that one more mitzvah that's necessary. And Mashiach could come just a little sooner, and then it will happen in a miraculous, awesome way that will bring about all of the salvation that we're waiting for. And you know what? Judaism embraces both of it, and we're going to finish with this idea. And really, this is something phenomenal, and this will bring home everything that we learned, bring it all together. Do you know that there's an opinion in Jewish law that a person who is a Kohen is not allowed to drink more than 3 ounces of wine? What? You know why? Because in temple times, the Kohen, the priests, had to serve in the temple, and they weren't allowed to be drunk. And if you're under the influence of about more than 3 ounces of wine, you consider that you're under the influence and you're not allowed to serve in the temple. So if you're going to drink 3 ounces of wine, Mashiach could come at any moment and you'll be called to serve in the temple and you're under the influence, so you shouldn't be allowed to drink wine. But listen, the Rebbe makes an interesting point, and he says, according to Jewish law, how long does it take for a priest, a Kohen, not to be considered any more under the influence? So according to the opinion that has the maximum amount of time is about 24 minutes and 40 seconds. from when you stop drinking until you're considered to be sobered up. So think about it. Jewish law tells a person, don't drink wine. Because it's possible that within the next 24 minutes and 40 seconds, the whole process of the coming of Mashiach could happen, and the temple will be on the Temple Mount in its place, and you're going to have to be standing there serving, and you have to be ready. That tells us how Judaism really gives us the ability to hope and really believe at any moment that Mashiach could come, and it doesn't have to happen in a slow process. So if you have a hard time embracing the, so to say, the radical idea of the world changing within 24 minutes and 40 seconds, then I tell you, okay, it could be happening over 300 years. It started a long time ago. Just start seeing things in a certain perspective. You see it's going there. But don't think that it has to be slow. It could also, if you pray and hope and do more that it should happen in one moment, it could happen also through our unleashing that last spark. So friends, l'chaim, first of all, that we should really take some time, think about what we learned. There's different perspectives. It can happen in a natural, gradual way, in a supernatural, sudden way, depending if it happens sooner when it's predestined time. Predestined time because evil expires, or sooner because we get all the gold that's hidden underneath the earth. We get all those sparks, and then it happens in a fast, amazing way. And both of them are happening at the same time. We're already long in the process of it happening in a gradual, natural way. Revelation of the deepest secrets of the Torah, joy in Judaism, the world embracing peace, reducing weapons, embracing justice and peace and liberty. And at the same time, that one mitzvah that we might do could tip the scale and bring the coming of Mashiach. L'chaim, may we merit that one mitzvah that needs to happen should be ours right now. And then within 24 minutes and 40 seconds, all of the Kohanim over here, don't drink too much because you're going to be standing in the temple doing your service. L'chaim, friends.
Chaim.
So, with that, we have concluded tonight's lesson, and I really hope you have gained and you've learned something new, and it helped you bring you closer to appreciating how amazing and how imminent the coming of Mashiach could be. Next week, God willing, we're going to have lesson 2. The topic of lesson 2 is Gog and Magog. What are those climactical wars? There's the world coming to an end with these different nations that have to happen before Mashiach comes. What does that mean? Do we need to suffer more, etc.? We'll discuss this, God willing, next week. Same place, same time. If you know someone who you think would enjoy this, I'll tell you, I let you share this Zoom information with them, even if they don't register, and they could come as well. And I'm going to be uploading the recording of this lesson to YouTube, and if you want it, let me know and I'll send it to you. Once again, thank you so much to all of you for joining us tonight. Thank you to our sponsors and contributing
Rabbi.
to the success.
Thank you, Rabbi. Kol hakavod.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless you all. Have a
Thank you,
wonderful
Rabbi.
night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adios.
You're very, very welcome.
Adios.
Kol hakavod.